And these are the ones that are responsible for the growth. And if you're not recruiting the fast twitch fiber motor units, your muscle growth potential will be extremely, and I mean that, extremely limited. Here's the good news. Once you've recruited them, Dave, once the fast twitch fibers are completely fatigued, they're done. The moment you have to think about whether you should go, it's like a relationship. If you're questioning it, you've got your answer.
Anthony, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, great to have you here. So last time we talked about losing fat and the lean 7. I thought it would be great to have you back and get more of your experience and talk about after we've kind of started losing that fat, what can we do for muscle building?
So you've said some interesting thing there. You've said after we have lost the fat, what can we do with muscle building, when really it should be done concurrently? The process of dropping body fat actually is through building muscle mass. So many have this skewed belief that once I've lost all this weight first, then I can focus on building muscle, when it should be happening at the same time, because adding more muscle tissue to your frame raises your resting metabolic rate, and it actually allows you to mobilize more fat at rest or more energy at rest. So it should be happening at the same time. So diet in a way as if you're trying to lose fat, train in a way as if you're trying to gain weight.
Why then is there this, I guess, fallacy out there that you can't do both at the same time?
People are fixated on this reductionistic approach when it comes to weight loss. They're constantly breaking down. And I said last time in the podcast, it's body building, not body shrinking. And so the goal here is to improve the metabolism, improve all your metabolic markers whilst you're trying to lose body fat. And it's the higher metabolism that actually helps you with fat loss. Okay, so the longer you go into fat loss without training, you start to catabolize muscle tissue and you go into a downward spiral in metabolism. So you'll end up losing in the end. You'll hit a fat loss plateau, and then you'll get to a place whereby you're not happy with your outcome because you don't have the physique you're after. So body recomposition is not really weight loss. It's a combination of fat loss and muscle augmentation. Gaining muscle is the name of the game for many reasons. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon speaks about the survival, one of the highest risk factors for cancer is obesity, but one of the greatest survival factors for cancer is the amount of muscle mass you carry. So the more muscle you carry to your frame, the greater the likelihood you have in surviving in the event of the big C happening.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a big one. So not to mention, of course, that muscle mass is an anti-aging organ. As we age, we naturally atrophy. The DNA is designed to check you out of life. So it is our goal to slow down the aging process, to do what we can to win the battle against gravity as we get older. And muscle mass is 100% imperative in doing that.
Interesting. So as a trainer, would you be looking at this as just a holistic getting your body into shape kind of thing, or a muscle building thing, or a longevity thing? Kind of what would be the focus that you would try and focus your customer on?
All of that, what you've just said right now, all of it actually fits into the same umbrella. You said muscle mass. Well, there's longevity involved in muscle mass. So the greatest contributor that they're saying now to longevity is grip strength. Grip strength. I knew of a gentleman in his 90s. He must have been like 96 when I met him. And he had the most incredible upright posture there is. He was sharp as a tack. He just shook my hand one day and I was like, man, okay, it's no accident. You probably lived to the 90 plus years. So all of it encompassing, Dave, everything. We try to add muscle mass. We also add muscle mass. When I was in London, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the previous podcast, but I trained a few, well, they're really type 3 diabetes patients, but we call them Alzheimer's disease. And I trained about five of these clients who had Alzheimer's. And through relative strength training, we were able to, all of them, improve memory recall. They just had bouts of remembering things every time they trained with weight training. And so there is this connection with the brain, and it's protective. And so when you train in a manner, especially, and you're recruiting, which we'll speak about in a second, a lot of the high threshold motor units, you start recruiting, improving the neural drive, and that helps with protecting you of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's.
Wow. So it's good to be metabolically healthy, but if
Mhm.
we really want to have longevity, if we really want to protect our brain, if we really want to live for as long as possible,
Mhm.
we really need to build muscle.
Yeah, it's a must. Building muscle is the name of the game. Bending bars is the name of the game. So when we go through this today, I'm going to first run you through a few things. Now, the way I like to sort of speak, my favorite way to speak really is off cuff without having to go through notes, but I have got lots of notes here to go through today, and we can break it up with questions. And I find that too much note taking and reading can lead to regimented, I'm trying to say here, just I'd like inspiration sort of dictate and sometimes let inspiration take us to wherever the podcast takes us. But there are certain guidelines I'll cover through. The first thing I want to do is just commend you on our prior interview that we did. I remember saying a great speaker makes the fewest words travel the furthest. Well, another quote for those who want to write today, it is speak in a way that people want to listen to you, but then listen in a way where people want to speak to you, and you do the latter. And this is why the last interview we did was so great, because you just allowed me to speak. That's fantastic. Yeah.
No, I mean, it was, I had the easy job. I just had to listen with, I was excited to be listening.
Yeah. I've got a few comments from that, and they were saying like you just kept on asking questions and just in awe, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it. And the comments, I just want to say this to all the listeners and all the viewers. Thank you so much for all the loving comments that you all made, and we really, Dave and I really appreciate the fantastic feedback. We'll do the best we can today to bring on the show again and try and cover as many grounds as possible in the most elementary ways possible without getting too scientific. Okay.
Sounds good. So I know nothing about this stuff. So where do we start?
Okay, first off, let's start with some etymology. The term hypertrophy. I don't want to sound too much like my big fat Greek wedding father that says it comes from the Greek word, but it really does. It's another Greek word. Damn those Greeks. It comes from the Greek word hypertrophia. So hyper meaning beyond, exceeding, and trophy means nourishment. So it's beyond, exceeding, nourishment. That's the definition of hypertrophy. Okay. Now, when somebody speaks about hypertrophy, they're automatically associated with just muscle. So if you were to Google right now hypertrophy, chances are excellent you're going to get pages after pages of muscle mass, as in ways to improve muscle mass. But really, muscle mass is only one form of hypertrophy that is in the body. There's the more accurate definition of hypertrophy would be the increase in the size of cells, tissues, or organs in the body. For example, last time we spoke, I ran through fat tissue and how it hypertrophies. So when you gain body fat, fat tissue can hypertrophy. We also have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or HCM. So that's a condition where the heart becomes abnormally thick. And so you can have hypertrophy of the heart, including many parts. So there's more to it. But for the sake of today, we also hypertrophy our beloved muscles. I'm going to find out exactly what that is. What do we do? Now, you're talking to somebody who had a fascination for building muscle mass since the age of when I was, I believe, the age of 5 or 6, when I started watching my first Bruce Lee movie. Back in the days, you know, The Game of Death, The Big Boss, and Enter the Dragon, and all of those movies that I watched. And I was absolutely fascinated. And then it was the Jean-Claude Van Damme era, and the Arnold Schwarzenegger era, and Sylvester Stallone. So I forever and a day had a fascination for hypertrophy. And I want to try the best today to try and minimize a lot of the mistakes people make when it comes to building muscle, and just try and simplify the process for everybody. So the term muscular hypertrophy, it simply means the increase in the size of a muscle through a subsequent increase in the size of its cells. Now, according to Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, who, by the way, is arguably the world's foremost researcher in hypertrophy and resistance training, he defined hypertrophy as this, and I quote it, he defined it as an increase in the size of muscle tissue. During the hypertrophic process, contractile elements enlarge and the extracellular matrix expands to support growth. Growth occurs by adding sarcomeres, increasing non-contractile elements and sarcoplasmic fluid, and bolstering satellite cell activity. What the? Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Dr. Brad. How do we simplify all of that? It's a big scientific scientific jargon there. So I'll try my best to sort of simplify the process. The real question is, what people want to know is, what makes muscles grow? What is responsible for triggering the hypertrophic response? Just say, for example, Dave, you take a look, you've gone to your first bodybuilding contest. Okay. Now, never been to one before. This is the first one you've gone to, and you're on stage, you're seeing on stage all these athletes, and they have three common denominators that you can probably suggest would be absolute. Here's the first one. They all possess larger than normal muscles. Would you agree? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's the first one. Number two. Well, they all use resistance training to grow larger than normal muscles. Okay.
Yep.
And number three would be, they all consume adequate dietary protein to support the growth and development of large than normal muscles. That's usually the only three common variables that we would have. Where things change, when they get confusing, is with the second one. That is, that they all use resistance training to grow larger than normal muscles. It's not that they use resistance training. It's the kind of resistance training that they do. And I can tell you, going to many bodybuilding contests, there are people that take one road to building muscle, training in one philosophy to build muscle, and there are people that take another road. At the end of the day, they're both building muscle mass through resistance training, but the training philosophies are different from person to person. And this is where the confusion often takes effect, okay? Now, since the early 50s and up until 2013, no one really sat down to sift through all of the literature and to come up with a general guideline for normal individuals who want to optimize muscular hypertrophy. Okay, no one's really done that. No one really dived deep into it. So for a long time, muscular hypertrophy was really based on opinion. It was based on trial and error, and it was based on tradition. I heard muscle grows in this particular way. I heard so-and-so did this, so I did that. If you walked into the gym right now, chances are excellent, if you knew nothing about building muscle, you'd probably find the biggest, most jacked guy in the gym and ask them, what did you do to build your muscle mass? True or not? You'd do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you'd do that. Okay. Well, the problem with that approach, we don't know a couple of things. Number one, this person may be what we call a hyper responder. They have a genetic predisposition to building muscle effortlessly or quickly. They might look at a dumbbell and gain muscle mass, number one. And number two, we don't know whether they're using PEDs, performance enhancing drugs. So we don't know that. And so we get advice from people that the advice may be obsolete. It may not serve us moving forward. Okay, so Simply put, muscle growth is the body's adaptive response to training stress. When we impose a level of stress the body is unaccustomed to, it's forced to grow back stronger in order to handle that stress in the future. Now, beyond the conventional understanding of stress, many people aren't aware that there is a myriad of stresses imposed on the body. Last time we spoke about cortisol, and it's a stress hormone. And we spoke about that there are so many different stresses in the body, including food sensitivity, lack of sleep, relationship, parental, financial, dehydration, toxicity stress. There are so many forms of stress that take toll on the body. And another form of stress I didn't mention, or maybe I did, I'm not sure, but was sun stress. Did we speak about sun stress?
I don't think we spoke about sun stress last time. Yeah. I don't think so.
So being out in the sun and getting a tan imposes some form of stress. Now, I use this concept carefully because it illustrates a similar adaptive response in which the body utilizes its defense mechanisms to overcome a particular form of stress, in this case, sunlight stress. So not many people know or are aware just how the body tans. They just don't know. So the UV rays from the sun that penetrates into the skin and it causes damage to it. In fact, tanned skin is nothing more than superficially damaged skin. And so the phenomenon of tanning is basically the body's adaptive response to sunlight stress. And so it does is to try to protect itself from ongoing UV radiation damage. That's what tanning is. So it attempts to combat the sun by producing more melanin into the skin cells. And it's the presence of more melanin that gives the body that darker appearance. And the darker the skin gets, the less penetrable it is by the sun. So in like manner, muscle growth is the body's way of protecting itself from a future onslaught imposed on by training stress.
It's really interesting when you look at it like that.
Yeah, that's what it is. As we undertake resistance training, we are causing superficial damage to the muscles. If you had a powerful microscope, you'd be able to see these little micro tears in the muscle fibers. And it's these micro tears that trigger the growth response in the body. So now, if the body was to communicate to you after experiencing something like resistance training, it would say something on the lines of, what on earth was that all about? Whatever it was, to protect my reserves from any future onslaughts, I'll just build new muscle mass in the event that this incident repeats itself in the future. And so the body builds new muscle mass as a protective barrier from future onslaughts in training stress. And it's almost a process whereby we're taking one step back to move 2 steps forward, meaning we're tearing down muscle through resistance training in order to trigger an adaptive response in muscular growth. In other words, we're taking one brick away from the wall to prompt the body to rebuild back 2 or more bricks. This is how it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome. Very clear.
Now, this is where we get a little bit more scientific and geeky, and I'll try and keep it, again, elementary as possible. There are 2 forms of a muscular hypertrophy or hypertrophy, depending on what side of the Yarra you're born. I remember in grade 6, my high school, primary school teacher in grade 6, Mrs. Mezievsky, I remember her name, she would say tomato, tomato, potato, potato, depending on what side of the Yarra you're born. And that was, I've remembered that for 20 plus years, man. Anyway, so there are 2 forms of muscular hypertrophy or hypertrophy. The first one is myofibrillar, and I'll break that down in a second. And the second one is sarcoplasmic. Sarcoplasmic. So both of these hypertrophy versions of, or levels of hypertrophy, classifications, I guess, of hypertrophy, they will result in an increase in the size of each muscle cell, okay? What distinguishes one from the other? Number 1 is the physiological effects that take place within the body. And number 2, the training requirements that encourage their potential to grow. Myofibrillar hypertrophy is responsible for up to 80% increase in the potential size of a muscle. And they call it myofibrillar hypertrophy because of the increased size of these rod-like units in the muscles known as myofibrils. That's why they call it that. So larger myofibrils, they allow the muscles to contract much harder, and they produce great force in muscular contraction through an overall increase in neural drive. Neural drive is basically the messages that the brain sends down to working muscles. So in other words, there is a powerful signal that's sent out to the muscles by the brain, and it allows them to contract with great force. And the end result is an overall improvement in strength and performance. So this kind of hypertrophy, Dave, it dominates in sports like Olympic weightlifting, like powerlifting, like strongman contests. It encourages functionality over form. And for this reason, it's actually often referred to as functional hypertrophy. So if you look at some of the sheer size of some of these athletes, it's just they can get really big. They train specifically for this sport. And one common denominator they all have is they lift heavy weight. And by lifting heavy weight through a particular movement pattern, they grow in size as a result of the intense load placed on their muscles. Okay? So to use an analogy, let's use an analogy here. Let's say, imagine your muscles were a balloon. If you were training for myofibrillar hypertrophy, we would be adding more rubber material to the cross-sectional area of the balloon. Now, with more elastic, now you have a larger balloon to fill up. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, on the other hand, is another form of muscular hypertrophy, and it's commonly referred to as the pump. Arnold Schwarzenegger used to speak about the pump. And it's given this name because it's due to an increase in the volume of this gooey-like muscle cell fluid known as sarcoplasm. That's why it's called sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. And although the cross-sectional area of the muscle increases because of this fluid buildup, so when you're performing a lot of reps in the gym, let's say you get a barbell and you're doing bicep curls, with higher reps, you start filling, the muscles fill up with this sarcoplasmic fluid. There is, however, a decrease in the density of the muscle fibers in that area. The muscles, they do swell up due to the training response. However, they can decrease in thickness with detraining over time. So you might do a set of barbell curls, and then 24, 48 hours and whatever, they start to go back to where they were. In fact, even sooner than that. And especially if you stop training altogether, they start to then atrophy, or they start losing their size through detraining.
So just to jump into on that point, so when if I go and do 30 push-ups right now, and then suddenly my chest seems a bit bigger, is that sarcoplasm?
Yes, that's sarcoplasmic hypertrophy right there. Yeah. Now, I'm going to get deeper into the 3 drivers of hypertrophy in a second, but one of those drivers is what was just spoken about, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Yeah. Okay. Now, this kind of hypertrophy, it's known as non-functional hypertrophy, as it encourages form over function, and it makes it ideal for people who wish to train for, aesthetic appearance rather than for athletic performance. And it's for individuals, in other words, it's for individuals who want to be built for show, not for go. Okay, built for show, not for go. They're like one of those display cars, where you go into a car show and it's a display car rather than a drag car. Okay, that's the difference. And so if we were to trace back our balloon analogy, remember myofibrillar adds more rubber material to the balloon, where sarcoplasmic hypertrophy would be adding more air into the balloon. Okay, so one adds more cross-sectional area of rubber, the other one adds more air into the balloon. I once knew a bodybuilder. He trained almost exclusively for the pump. He'd come in there and just work on trying to get a pump. He wasn't fixated on how much weight he was lifting. He was just fixated on trying to get as much pump, as much blood into the muscles as possible. He was incredibly big and muscular, and he basically lifted very moderate weights. Gym goers used to flock to this guy and ask him advice all the time, what he did to grow his muscles to the size that they were. You know what he used to say? I remember it clearly. It's not what you lift, it's how you lift. That was his first thing he used to say. Then the second thing he would say is, hey, bro, it's not how much I bench, it's how much I look like I can bench. Okay. So this guy was just growing massive muscles, but he was lifting very moderate weight. So clearly he was training for sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, but he was training frequently to always keep the pump in there. Especially I'd see him I was working in a gym when I was younger, and I'd see him coming in on the weekends, maybe on a Friday afternoon, just before he'd head out and do like an arms routine and just pump up the arms before he goes out. Okay. So now with that, when we train for the pump, fascia tissue is stretched out, blood flow and other nutrients are driven into the muscles, and the muscle increases in size as the muscles increase because they're able to handle greater volumes of blood. That's why this guy would go in and train his arms, because for the next 10, 12 hours, he'd be had pumped up arms and go out and show them off. Who knows? Now, the body can grow with both phases of hypertrophy. One method, the myofibrillar, as we spoke about, that favors the growth contractile of proteins, whilst the other, sarcoplasmic, that promotes hypertrophy through an increase in energy substrate storage. Now, this is where mistakes tend to happen with powerlifters and bodybuilders. I've trained both. I've trained powerlifters and I've trained bodybuilders. Now, in the past, powerlifters seldom leave out of 5 reps. Everything is about 1 to 5 reps for them because their goal is to get stronger. So they seldom get out of the 5 rep range. So what are they, by the way, I'm going to test you right now. What are they training? Are they training sarcoplasmic or myofibrillar hypertrophy?
I'll probably say it wrong. Myofibrillar.
No, you're right. Yeah, absolutely, you're right. So you got that one. Boys listening, I like it. So they're training for myofibrillar hypertrophy. So they'd be saying, and why would I want to train in the higher rep ranges if my goal is maximum strength? Fair question. And then the bodybuilders were typically training somewhere in the vicinity of no less than 6 reps. And they were training up from 6 up to 20, maybe even 30 reps. And they would say to me, but Anth, I don't want to build strength. I want to build size. Why would I train in the lower rep ranges? Again, fair question. So they're training more sarcoplasmic and the powerlifters are training more myofibrillar. Now, here's the problem. Let's say we have 3 individuals. And the first individual wants to train solely for strength. The second individual, let's say all of them, one wants to train for strength, one wants to train for size, but the third individual wants to train for strength and size. Okay. Now, if the first individual was training in the myofibrillar rep ranges of up to 5, if they were doing that for 12 weeks, in the 12 weeks, the person who exclusively trains in the lower rep range would be the strongest out of the 3. Okay. So the first, I'll say that again because I don't want to confuse everybody. There's 3 types of people. The first person wants to build only strength. The second person wants to build only size, but the third person wants to build strength and size. Okay. In the first 12 weeks, the person who trains solely for strength in that 12 weeks compared to all 3 athletes will be the strongest. The second person who trains only size in that 12 weeks will be the strongest. The third person who cycles between 6 weeks of strength and 6 weeks of size will not be the strongest out of those or be the biggest out of those 2. However, if we pulled back the 12 weeks into 1 year, and the person who cycles from strength and size will actually get stronger and more muscular than the first 2.
Really? So can I just step back and just clarify? So the first guy is going to get stronger in the 12 weeks. The second guy is going to get bigger in the 12 weeks.
Yes.
But overall, the last guy is going to do better in both.
Yes, because the way it works is if the first person's solely getting out of the 5 rep ranges, they're going to get stronger in that 12-week period. However, there's a point of diminishing returns with the body, and it starts to sort of like adapt. And people don't understand one thing about this, and that is, if I'm a power lifter, getting bigger, getting larger muscles is a tool I can use to get stronger muscles. So if I start flipping around my training, if I'm gone, let's say 6 to 8 weeks of strength training versus 6 to 8 weeks of hypertrophy training, by getting larger muscles, they have greater contractile power to then get stronger muscles. So getting bigger is a tool a power lifter can use to get stronger. Okay. On the flip side, a bodybuilder who wants to get bigger, not necessarily stronger, getting stronger is a tool the bodybuilder can use to get bigger. Meaning, if they go for 10, 12 weeks training in the 6 to 20 rep range, but then they spend 10, 12 weeks getting stronger in the 3 to 5 rep range, now they can translate that new strength into the higher rep ranges. And by now lifting heavier weight in the higher rep ranges, they can start adding more muscle mass. Does that make sense? You got that one?
Yeah.
So really what they're saying now, whether you're training in the 5 rep range, whether you're training in heavyweight in the 5 rep range, the studies have shown heavyweight in the 5 reps, whether you're going moderate weight for 12 or lightweight for 30, if your goal is pure muscular hypertrophy, you will be able to build equal amount of muscle, providing you go to what we call momentary muscular failure. We'll talk about that in a second as well. Okay. So now going back to Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, he isolated that there are 3 main drivers for muscular hypertrophy. The first one is mechanical tension. So mechanical tension seems to be the main driver of hypertrophy, and it's been shown to stimulate mTOR, which stands for mammalian target of rapamycin. It's an enzymatic pathway, and it's involved in the synthesis of protein. Okay, now to create high mechanical tension, you've got to use high loads. And the greater the load, the greater the tension of each muscle fiber. That's mechanical tension. Then there's, of course, the second driver of hypertrophy, which is metabolic stress. We spoke about that sarcoplasmic fluid. This is the accumulation of muscle metabolites that result from resistance training after the higher reps. So basically, it's the pump. We spoke about the pump earlier. It's when the muscle works hard enough and it develops this buildup of byproducts, usually lactate, hydrogen ions, and sarcoplasm. And sarcoplasm, by the way, makes up about 20% of the muscle. And the final driver of hypertrophy is muscle damage. So clearly, if we're breaking down a muscle fiber so that it can build itself up again, that stimulus, if that's the stimulus, then hypertrophy would not be able to occur without muscle damage. So it's the physical disruption to the contractile elements of skeletal muscle tissue. And that leads to this unpleasant phenomenon known as DOMS. Do you remember DOMS? DOMS? No?
DOMS, no.
Delayed onset muscle soreness. When you've trained in a particular way and for the next day or 2, maybe even a week, your muscles are sore. That's what that is. So delayed onset muscle soreness. So the repair of this damage is what promotes the growth of the muscle that's concerned. Okay, so now the exact contribution to which of these drivers play the most significant role in hypertrophy is usually up for debate. Many believe, however, with almost full certainty, including myself, that the greatest driver for muscular hypertrophy out of the 3, out of mechanical tension, out of metabolic stress, and out of muscle damage, is in fact mechanical tension. That seems to be the driver, and metabolic stress and muscle damage are the passengers that come for the ride. Meaning, if you train hard enough within a rep or 2 to failure, you're probably going to get a pump and you're probably going to get some muscle damage, but those aren't the drivers of the growth. They are the passengers. The true growth is mechanical tension. So we're going to focus on mechanical tension a little bit more right now. So I want you to picture a biceps curl. Okay. And you got two, yeah, you got it. It's the most common exercise people can picture right now. So you got the lengthened position of an exercise. The lengthened would be what, David? Which were at the bottom or top? The lengthened. Yeah. So if we're lengthening the arm, where's the? That's it. Okay.
Bottom.
So the lengthening part of the exercise, when the arms are down at the bottom. Let's say you got two dumbbells and your arms are fully extended at the bottom. Okay. At the bottom on a standing dumbbell curl, there's very little tension with your arms fully stretched out. Okay. So studies have shown what actually contributes to greater muscular hypertrophy is when the muscle is at the lengthened position rather than the shortened position. Okay. This is why it's imperative that you always train through full range of motion. And to slow down your cadence, that is how quickly or slow you move through the movement pattern, typically about 3 to 5 seconds on the way down. And you want to be choosing exercises that create tension at the end range. For example, again, the standing dumbbell curl that you're doing, it's not providing as much end range tension as, let's say, if I had a dumbbell on a pre-chick bench and you got a bench here, that lengthened position that the biceps is in creates a lot more mechanical tension than just you having the dumbbells by your side. Okay. Another one would be an incline dumbbell curl. When you're sitting back on an incline bench, 45-degree incline bench, and you're sitting back that way, and then the arms are behind the torso. In that lengthened position, as you extend the arms all the way down, that lengthened position you take your arms actually creates a lot more hypertrophy. This is why it's imperative when you're training to be training through full range of motion.
So can I just jump in? So when you see someone in the gym and they're like, "Oh, I'm really busy," and they just rush in to do some exercises and they're doing the dumbbell curls, like that's not doing anything, right?
It's what I tell them is like, move fast from exercise to exercise, lift slow. Move fast from machine to machine, but lift slow. Okay. So if you're going to give yourself 20 minutes, spend 20 minutes lifting slow, but you can move fast from one machine to the other or from one exercise to the other. Okay. So to answer your question, no, the answer is no. They're not going to get an effective workout if they're in a hurry. Okay. Now, so another exercise, by the way, would be a squat. Let's say you got a barbell behind your back. If you're standing right there, there's really no tension in the quadriceps. It's only once you enter knee angle, once you start bending the knees, that mechanical tension takes place. Okay, so if you can get to a place where you can squat deep enough to create as much knee angle as possible, to create as much stretch of the quadriceps in that lengthened position as possible, that's going to maximize if your goal is hypertrophy. A full squat is always better than a 90-degree squat if your goal is to build muscle in the legs. Now, if you can't squat, no problem. Do the same thing with the leg press. Here's a mistake people make on the leg press, the 45-degree leg press. They take they're on the leg press. Where you position your feet will then dictate where in the lower extremities in the legs you're going to recruit. If you take your feet out to the side and you're coming down, you're not creating much knee angle. You're creating more hip angle. So you're going to be driving the force from the quadriceps to the glutes and hamstrings. Okay. Now, if your goal is to hit the quadriceps, by bringing your feet closer in and down, you increase the knee angle as you're coming into a leg press. Now you're recruiting more of the quadriceps. Okay. To add to that, if you paused for a second or two during the disadvantageous aspect of the lift. What's that, Anthony? It's the part of the lift that has poor leverage. If you're doing it, you know what a chin up is?
Yeah.
Yeah. A chin up when you're taking your arms all the way down and you're pulling yourself up. Cool. When you get yourself to the bottom of the rep in the stretch position, when you're here, if you pause for 2 seconds before you lifted, that creates a lot more hypertrophy than you bouncing out from rep after rep. So if you've stopped here as opposed to stopping there, just imagine hanging from a cliff. If you're hanging from a cliff and the scapula is upwardly rotated. Right now, it has poor leverage to retract, so it's upwardly rotated. And so that recruits a lot more motor units. That creates a lot more micro trauma. That gets a lot of a better workout. So pausing in the disadvantageous aspect of the lift, meaning seek the path of most resistance. You know, when you were younger, your parents would say to you, don't put your hands on the stove, you're going to get burned. Well, you've got to unteach all of that in hypertrophy training because you've got to keep your hands on the stove as long as possible. In other words, if you miss the pain zone, you've missed the growth zone. Got it?
And yeah, so I mean, that kind of intuitively makes sense to me, just because I feel like if you aren't like fully going back to that hanging position before you start again,
Yes.
then you're taking advantage of momentum.
Good call. Yeah, momentum. And if you are incorporating momentum, you're missing muscle fibers along the way. That's why Mr. Momentum is the worst training partner. It robs intensity from the workout. The other thing you're going to have to overcome when you're in that stopping position is the forces of inertia. You have to overcome inertia. And if you're overcoming inertia, you're recruiting a lot more motor units, you're making the exercise a lot harder, and you are not missing muscle fibers along the way. And that's the difference. So finding exercises that allow you to accentuate the lengthened position, or putting yourself in a position whereby you are accentuating the lengthened position of an exercise, of a muscle, I should say, that allows for greater mechanical tension, which then improves the hypertrophic response. Does that make sense? Yeah? Got it. Awesome. Now, in saying all of that, how do we simplify this? How do we get to a place whereby, because hypertrophy is this subject that can be really confusing for people not knowing where to start, what to do. Well, in 2013, the exercise scientists from the UK, three of them, James Steele, James Fisher, and Dave Smith, they did a study on all of the available peer-reviewed scientific literature for muscular hypertrophy over the past 50 years, Dave. 50 years. And for those that want to actually look it up, it's titled Evidence-Based Resistance Training Recommendations for Muscular Hypertrophy. Surprise, surprise. Okay. All 131 studies were compiled and they were dissected with a fine-tooth comb in order to find out what is the best, most optimal way to grow muscle tissue. Okay. These guys looked at everything that was peer-reviewed and everything that was well-controlled. Most importantly, this is what they did. They looked at papers that eliminated elite populations like bodybuilders and professional athletes. Why? Because these individuals, they tend to skew the recommendations because of their genetics, and they would basically respond in spite how they trained, right? So somebody who's genetically gifted, doesn't matter what you give them, low reps, high reps, heavyweight, lightweight, they would grow in spite. So they got rid of all of those variables. Basically, for the everyday, these recommendations will work both for trained and untrained natural individuals. Okay, now we're going to go through a few. For those that want to get all the rest of the recommendations, I suggest you go and look it up. Look up the study and go through the conclusion section and just have a read of that. Again, it was titled Evidence-Based Resistance Training Recommendations for Muscular Hypertrophy. Are you ready for the most important factor that what makes muscles grow? It's 3 words: intensity of effort. Intensity of effort is the most important factor in growing muscle tissue. The quality of your physique is in direct proportion to the amount of intensity placed on it. Write that one down. The quality of your physique is in direct proportion to the level of intensity placed on it. Now, persons, and I'm just reading straight off the study here, persons should aim to recruit as many motor units, we'll speak about them in a second, and thus muscle fibers as possible by training to momentary muscular failure. What's a motor unit? A motor unit comprises of a motor neuron and the muscle fibers it controls. So just imagine, I want you to imagine a motor unit represents a matchbox, and the muscle fibers are each individual matchstick inside the matchbox. Got it? Cool. Now, motor neurons, they transmit signals from the brain or the spinal cord to the muscles, whereas muscle fibers are the individual cells responsible for muscular contractions. So when a motor neuron activates, all the muscle fibers within its motor unit contract, and that leads to coordinated muscle movement. That's how muscular contractions take place. Now, most skeletal muscles in the human body contain 3 types of muscle fibers, although they're in varying proportions. And here they are. You probably heard of these ones before. We spoke about them last time with the sprinters and the marathon runners. Okay, maybe not. Not sure if we spoke about them. But anyway, here they are. Slow oxidative or slow twitch fibers, fast oxidative, and fast glycolytic. You probably heard that term before, Dave, like slow twitch fibers and fast twitch fibers. Remember them?
Yeah, I've heard them before.
Cool. Twitch, by the way, that refers to the contraction. So how quickly and often a muscle moves, that's what the twitch means. Now, these muscle fibers, Dave, slow twitch and fast twitch, they run on a continuum, and they're recruited in sequential order from slow to fast. This is called the Henneman's size principle. So in 1957, Elwood Henneman, he was an American neurophysiologist, and he stated that the motor units are recruited in order from smallest to largest, depending on the intensity of the force being applied. So the other thing to note about muscle fibers is they can adapt to changing demands by changing size or fiber top composition. What this means is basically they have a morphology to them. They can morph into whatever modality of training or lack of training they're exposed to. Somebody who puts their breaks their arm and it's in plaster, the fiber type compositions that the muscle fibers were prior to going in plaster, I can guarantee you would change after 8 to 12 weeks of inactivity. So whatever you don't use, you
lose.
I love when you put yourself back on. I love when you put yourself back off you. It's so cool. Yeah, whatever you don't use, you lose. Whatever you don't employ, you forfeit, basically. So muscle fibers have a way, they've got a morphology to them, and they change based on whatever modality of exercise they're exposed to. So this explains why the marathon runner that continues to run for an hour and 2 and so forth, those fast twitch fibers that they had, they start morphing into slow twitch fibers to make the body more efficient at the activity. Okay. Now, there's more to it. We're going to go into these so you understand a bit more about these fibers, so you know the difference between them. So slow twitch fibers first. Number one, they're known as type 1 fibers. They're aerobic in nature, and they're characterized by their endurance-oriented properties. Now, these fibers, they're smaller motor units, not big at all, and they contract slowly, and they're highly resistant to fatigue, so they can last a long time. And this makes them well suited for sustained power, low intensity activities like endurance running, cycling, or even maintaining posture. I'm recruiting them. You are, but we're both recruiting them in this very moment now. And they've got a high concentration of mitochondria, which provides energy for aerobic metabolism. And they're also very rich in myoglobin. It's a protein that stores oxygen. And they're sometimes referred to as red muscle fibers because of their blood supply. We call them low threshold motor units because they require low force to be recruited. That's why we call them low threshold motor units. They have a very high excitability to them, which means it does not take much to recruit them. Low force, they get recruited with very low force, like me waving my hand around right now. We're both recruiting slow twitch fibers in this very moment. Now, here's the thing. These muscle fibers do not have any muscular hypertrophy potential at all, maybe something very little. If they did, then everybody, do you know what a Belgian bull looks like? Have you ever seen a Belgian bull? All right, while I'm explaining this, just Google Belgian bull. Now, these guys, these animals, they have muscle over muscle standing there doing absolutely nothing. They've got a gene mutation of myostat, which we won't speak about now. There's a gene mutation within them. But Dave's looking at them, it's like these huge muscular beasts. Okay. They've got a gene mutation of myostatin, and the less myostatin that they produce, the more muscle mass that they create. And anyway, if standing still was enough to produce maximum muscle mass, everybody would be walking around jacked. But standing still, moving around, walking, these type of activities do not warrant an adaptive response to recruit the muscle fibers that are responsible for growth. And it's not the slow twitch fibers, because when we're walking around, jogging and whatever, we're recruiting the slow twitch fibers. So they're not responsible for maximizing muscle growth. Okay. So that's those.
So can I just jump in? I've got a question. You mentioned the word aerobic before. So slow twitch fibers are aerobic. Does that mean that fast twitch fibers are anaerobic?
You got it. Man switched on, man. The man is switched on.
Sten Ekberg taught me that. So I guess anaerobic is like when you're panting and sweating when you're exercising, right?
Yeah, when you're working the lactate threshold, you're in that threshold, yes. Athletes, again, that display a predominance in slow twitch fiber composition would be long distance runners. Okay. Now, fast twitch fibers, on the other hand, they're broken down into two categories, type 2A and type 2B. The type 2A, the fast oxidative, the fibers, they have fast contractions, and they're primarily used. They are also used for aerobic respiration, but because they may switch to anaerobic respiration, that is glycolysis, they can fatigue more quickly than the slow oxidative fibers or the slow twitch fibers. Now, here are the ones that are responsible for muscle growth, so you know them. They're called the type 2B fibers. They're fast glycolytic fibers, and they have fast contractions, and they're used for anaerobic glycolysis. These fibers fatigue more quickly than others, and they have a low excitability factor to them. What that means is it takes a lot of effort to recruit them. Again, this is why people don't walk around jacked, because the amount of intensity of effort that's required to recruit them is high. Again, this is why we call them high threshold motor units. They have all of the hypertrophy potential. They're thicker in nature. They're contractile proteins. They've got more of them, which means they can produce a lot more force, contractile force. And again, this is why we call them high threshold motor units. If your goal is maximum muscular hypertrophy, and it should always be your goal, you want to be engaging, stimulating, and fatiguing these muscle fibers. You want to be addressing and recruiting these. Now, there are two ways to do that. Number one, lifting a heavy weight from A to B with explosive form, typically 80 to 90% of your 1 rep maximum. Now, problem I have with that is explosive movements are going to recruit the fast twitch fibers, but the only problem is high peak forces, which means your chances of getting injured goes up. The second way to recruit them is to train to momentary muscular failure, which is what the three exercise scientists were saying. Training intensity or intensity of effort needs to be through the roof. So we know for us to grow maximum muscle mass, we have to be recruiting these fast twitch fibers. These fast twitch fibers are resistant. They've got low fatigue, but they're resistant to being stimulated. Their excitability factor is very low. Just picture like 3 cogs. You've got a small one representing slow twitch fibers. You've got an intermediate one, a medium one representing the type 2A, and then the large circle represents type 2B. Okay. When you're training, let's say you're doing a biceps curl right now. Let's say Dave can curl 20 kilograms for no more than 10 reps, meaning like he can't do 11 reps. If you curled the first rep and put the weight down, would David grow? The answer is no. He would not grow. he'd not be recruiting the high threshold motor units. He's not recruiting the fast twitch fibers that are responsible for growth. If you did the second rep, now the second rep is more intense than the first rep. So he's recruiting the slow twitch fibers now. And now his third and fourth rep, he starts to recruit the intermediate fibers now. They start getting recruited. And as he approaches the 7th and 8th and 9th, now he's gritting through the teeth, man. Now it's spleen through the eye. Now it's like, I mean, we're just really struggling to get this weight up. But he gets that last almost impossible rep where he's just gone and he's lifted it and he's put it down. He could not do an 11th rep. I call that the light switch rep. The light switch rep is that last almost impossible rep where you've stimulated the growth mechanism by recruiting the high threshold motor units, fast twitch fibers. Okay.
This is so interesting to hear it described that way, because now this gives a very clear understanding of why you train to failure.
Yes.
Rather than just, oh, well, you know, you do as many as you can.
And we're going to talk about the difference between true muscular failure and what other people, because it's so subjective. People have skewed representations of what it means to truly reach muscular failure. True muscular failure is not a sticking point. You know, a sticking point when you're going through a rep and you just get to about here and you can't get to there, or you think you can't get to there, so you give up. That's not true muscular failure. That's a sticking point. And so when people are researching all of this, is that you?
I have sticking points every time I try and go to the gym.
I love it. Okay. Next time you come down to Adelaide, I'll put you through your paces. Okay. So the reason why so many people can actually withstand many sets is because they're not fully recruiting the fast twitch fiber muscles. That's why. Okay. That's why they can actually do multiple sets. Now, to recruit the fast twitch fibers, you want to be recruiting them in a manner that is slower in cadence. We spoke about that earlier on. You want to move the weight slowly, but as long as you're addressing momentary muscular failure. How slow? I like to go 3 to 5 seconds in the positive and 3 to 5 seconds in especially the negative. The negative on the way down, it must be a lot slower than on the way up. Okay. Now, the first couple of reps won't be as demanding as your last 1 or 2 reps. You're still hitting the slow twitch fibers in the first few reps into the intermediate fibers. So when the set starts to become intense, the fast twitch fiber, the fast twitch motor units, they kick in, and that's when you start using them. And these are the ones that are responsible for the growth. And if you're not recruiting the fast twitch fiber motor units, your muscle growth potential will be extremely, and I mean that, extremely limited. Here's the good news. Once you've recruited them, Dave, once the fast twitch fibers are completely fatigued, they're done. You've switched on the growth mechanism. It's like a light switch that turns on. Once it's on, you cannot switch an on switch. If it's on, I can't on it further, if that makes sense. You do not require a set.
They're out of the gate now.
Yeah. Why are people doing multiple sets after that? I'll give you one reason why. Do you know why they do that? Because of fear of leaving gains on the table. They fear that by not doing another set, a second or a third or a fourth or a fifth set, they fear they're not doing enough. Let's flip that around. What if your fear, what if the fact that by you doing multiple sets, you're leaving gains on the table through the fact that you're now not recovering enough. Okay.
So this is really one of those work smarter, not harder kind of things.
It's work harder and smarter. By working harder, we're working smarter. Okay. So we're increasing intensity of effort. And intensity of effort is not based around how much we do as far as volume of sets. It's how hard we go in one set only. Because our goal is to recruit as many motor units as possible. And once we've done that, once we've recruited all of the muscle fibers there is to recruit, the growth mechanism is switched on. We have depleted almost the entire motor unit pool. Now, I should note, it's not always, we don't always recruit the entire motor unit pool. The body leaves a few in reserve just to protect you. So for example, the average quadricep has between 2,000 to 4,000 motor units. And let's say you did a set of leg presses or squats to momentary muscular failure. You may have fatigued 3,800 motor units, 3,009. The body always leaves some in reserve to protect you, okay? Just so a full depletion doesn't take place. But that's the idea, to recruit as many motor units as possible, and you don't need multiple sets to do that. In fact, the exercise scientists that did this, they said that there is no difference between one or multiple sets, as long as you take it to momentary muscular failure. Okay? So you can't stimulate them again once you've switched them on. That's why if you did another set after the one that you did, you're simply retracing back to the slow and intermediate muscle fibers. They're the ones that aren't responsible for muscular growth potential. You're going back to stimulate those slow twitch fibers and the intermediate ones. If you're training to failure and you've recruited the last of the fast twitch fibers, any additional set after that provides no additional benefit. The end. Okay? If you think that's not the case, go speak with Dorian Yates and say you need to train 2 or 3 or 4 sets. For those that don't know, Dorian Yates is a 6-time Mr. Olympia who advocated the one set to failure theory. And he's taken that from people like Mike Menzer, who took it from Arthur Jones and other people. So you do not require more than one set taken to failure to grow muscle tissue. Okay. Now, in fact, Dorian, his best physique was in 1993, Mr. Olympia, the 92 to 93. And that's when he really started taking the one set to failure. Earlier on leading his career, he wasn't doing one set to failure. Only from 92 onwards, he started doing the single set to failure. Now, clearly he's got superior genetics, but he was able to use superior genetics with most efficient way of training to maximize his fullest potential. Not saying that multiple sets won't get you there. They will. They've been getting other people there. What I am saying, though, is you're not going to reach your fullest potential in the most efficient time as possible without damaging and having injuries. People keep forgetting, by the way, the many sets that you do, you're creating a lot more repetitive damage to your joints, which leads to soft tissue injuries. You're doing 4 or 5 or 6 sets to the same movement pattern week after week after week, you're going to have issues. Okay. Now, the reason why so many people can withstand more sets is because they're not fully recruiting the last, all of the fast twitch fibers in that one set. They're not taking their body to honest, truly honest, momentary muscular failure. So the goal with muscular failure, by the way, and I didn't mention this earlier, you want to be approaching momentary muscular failure, not hitting. There's a difference. So this is hitting muscular failure. That's hitting muscular failure. Approaching muscular failure is a little different. You're taking a biceps curl, and like you're hyperventilating through the rep, and you're breathing through it, and you're trying to land the plane as slowly, as safely as possible, but you're slowly approaching muscular failure. Once the pain kicks in, that's when you're welcoming it. That's when you're really looking forward to the movement. Was it Muhammad Ali? They say, how many crunches do you do? He goes, I don't count. I only start to count once it starts to hurt, or something along those lines that he says. I'm not sure exactly how he said it. So when you are approaching muscular failure, you're moving slowly between each repetition. You're hyperventilating, and you're doing what you can to break through that sticking point you spoke about. You're constantly trying to get comfortable with your discomfort through the movement patterns. And most people think that they've gone to failure, but they have not. I've had people train with me and it's like, OMG, I ain't doing that. I am not doing that. So that's the difference, okay? But most people, the moment they hit a sticking point, oh, that's it, pack it up, the set's done. No wonder why you're doing so many sets and requiring so many sets. Think of it like this, Dave. We're trying to clean a floor. We're trying to polish a floor. You doing multiple sets to get there is like using a toothbrush and brushing every corner. You doing one set to momentary, true, honest failure is like grabbing a massive mop and going, boom. Okay, that's the difference. Or like, sure enough, if I took my car to a car wash, those ones that you drive into, in and out, that spin, if I do it once, it superficially cleans it. If I do it a second time, by the time I do a third time, it's going to clean it really, really good. Same thing with sets. You might do multiple sets and eventually you recruit the entire motor unit pool after 3 or 5 sets. And that will be enough. But if you took it to a car detailer who took every corner to really focus on cleaning it and did it once, one set is all you need. The other thing to note, Dave, is duration per set is really important. How long it takes you in one given set for true muscular failure to take place. Charles Poliquin used to speak about time and attention, and that was in the vicinity of 40 to 70 seconds in a given set for muscles to be continuously under tension for muscular hypertrophy to take place. Anything under 30 seconds, you're training for strength, and anything between 40 and 70, and even up to 90 seconds. In fact, I believe that 90 seconds would be the sweet spot. So you probably see me in the gym. I won't be counting reps. I've got a stopwatch, and they're going to grab the weight, and we're going to go 5 seconds each way. They're doing a lat pull down, 5 seconds on the way down, 5 seconds on the way up. They're saying how, and they're asking me how many. I'm like, not how many, how long? So it's like 90 seconds. Usually the 90-second mark is where it's at, where they start reaching momentary muscular failure around that time frame, okay? Now, I made some notes here, and I want to share them with you. More effort equals more tension. The more effort that you put into the set, the more motor units you recruit. Heavier weight causes you to perform with more effort, yet a greater weight will help you recruit more motor units, but it is not necessary for recruiting more motor units. What do I mean by that? Well, I've got a wall right here. If I push against a wall, that'll feel heavy. It'll feel like a heavy weight. But is that more weight or is that more resistance? If I push against the wall, is it heavy weight or is it resistance? Is the wall resisting against me?
Resistance.
It is. Okay. So weight is one component of resistance. Let me give you another one. Velocity. We just spoke about it. Speed. If you've gone boom, 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 1 second up, 1 second down, like that rush guy into the gym. But if we've now gone 4 seconds up, 6 seconds down, will that change the resistance? Speed does. Speed will change resistance. Okay. Guess what else changes resistance, Dave? Leverage or moment arm. If you grabbed a barbell that's just outside your shoulders and you lifted that 20 kilogram barbell and you placed it down, but now we've grabbed an Olympic bar, which is actually a lot wider than a smaller bar, that longer moment arm will create more resistance. Okay, so the longer lever creates more resistance. Think about it. If you had a chain, you know how they use those chains with the ball on the end to demolish walls? What creates more force, a shorter chain or a longer chain? A longer chain.
Longer.
A longer chain. A longer chain creates more resistance, okay? So the longer the lever, the more resistance we're creating. Another one's body proportions. I've got a friend of mine. He's a short guy. He can bench press 240 kilos. but his femur, he goes from here. He's so short that he just lifts the bar from there to there, and his body proportions are so short, which has an impact, has a role to play with resistance. The shorter the body proportions, the less resistance. The longer the body proportions, the more resistance. A guy who's 6'8", trying to squat down to the ground, good luck. Imagine a guy who's 6'8" with a long femur like that. Did I say femur? I meant humerus. Humerus femur. So a guy with a short femur, like a short humerus, like my friend, will press from here to there, and that's all he has to press. So the resistance is a lot lower for him because his body proportions are short. But a guy with long legs trying to do a squat pattern, as he goes all the way down and coming back up, it's like, it's like an eternity to squat, being that tall. So what I'm trying to say is that there are different factors that impact resistance. Weight is one of them. Velocity, the speed, is another one. The slower the velocity, the greater the resistance. Leverage or moment arm is another one. The longer the leverage, the greater the resistance. Body proportions is another one. And finally, friction. We spoke about that earlier. When you're at the bottom of a rep and you're hanging, starting movement from a stopping position creates more resistance. Okay. Now, they all contribute to resistance. Many people will improve a muscle size even if they do volume. And failure is not always a requirement, but failure is not a requirement, but it is the best stimulants. Meaning you can do many, many sets and not go to complete failure, or you do one set to failure, and that is the best stimulus to grow muscle tissue. You don't need to recruit all the motor units to stimulate muscle growth, but you do need to recruit all the motor units to stimulate muscle growth in all of the muscles, which means if you want all of your muscles to grow, you need to train to failure. We actually, by the way, for those that don't know, we train to failure because we don't know if 3 reps in reserve recruits all the motor units there is. We don't know that. We don't know if 2 reps in reserve does that. We don't know if 1 rep in reserve does that. I'll tell you what that means, by the way, Dave. It's known as the rate of perceived exertion. Let's say I've got you on the shoulder press. We're sitting down and we're pressing. You're finishing your set off. You've just gone down. Okay, cool. Dave, if every rep was $100,000 that you've left in the tank, how many do you think you would have had left? If every rep you did not complete was 100 grand, how many would you have had left? Now, if you said to me, if that's the case, maybe 2, I would have had 2 more. If each rep was 100 grand. Okay.
You'd put in more effort, right?
You would. Okay. So let's say, for example, you've stopped at a set and I've said to you, okay, you've just stopped at that set. If every rep past that rep that you stopped at was 100 grand, how many could you have done extra? If you said to me 2, from 10, we minus 2, and that set you've just done would be an 8 out of 10 intensity. Okay, which means you've left 2 reps in reserve. If you said to me, and maybe 1, from 10 minus 1, that would make it a 9 out of 10 intensity. And if you said to me, Anthony, screw your 100 grand, there was no way known I had an extra rep in me, that would make it a 10 out of 10 intensity. That is what we mean by going to momentary muscular failure, is honestly knowing you've got not 1 rep left in the tank, okay? And what I said earlier is that the reason why we train to failure is we do not know if 3 reps in reserve recruits all of the motor units, meaning you've gone to there and you stopped and you've left 3 reps in the tank. We don't know if that does it. We don't know if 2 does it. We don't know if 1 rep in reserve does it. We go to failure because we do not know. And if we go to failure, we hit the threshold and we ensure all the motor units are recruited for full potential growth in muscle tissue. Does that make sense? That's why we go to failure.
Perfect.
And not only that, Dave, but like How do you know if you've only got 2 reps left in reserve? You don't know that either. But what you do know is when you go to full muscular failure, you have no other reps left. That way you secure and you ensure that you've recruited all the muscle fibers. Now, how do we put together a little program for people that want to take away with this now? And for those that haven't trained before, we can maybe put together a little program to help them on their way. All right. I'm going to give 5 exercises. 5 exercises that people can take away from now and start doing today. And it's going to be a full body workout. Full body workout. We're going to borrow this one from Doug McGuff from Body by Science. Great book. Okay. Here are the 5 exercises. 4 upper body exercises, 1 lower body exercise. The first upper body exercise is going to be what we call a vertical pulling movement. Either a supinated palms up, pull down, or a chin up. Yeah, either you're pulling yourself up to an object, like a chin up, or you're pulling an object to you, like a lat pull down. That's the first one. Now, it's imperative that you warm up thoroughly, especially the first exercise of every program. Every program you come into, you get to warm up. So I recommend that you're warming up at least 1 to 2 what we call acclimation sets that get you primed for the working set. So once you've warmed up, and don't spend too much time warming up as in doing too many reps, because it is a warm up. I don't want you like exhausting yourself and wasting all that potential for the working set. Okay. So we don't know what your data says yet, meaning we haven't got data on your previous time you've done this, but in the future, when we do have data, let's say, for example, that David has looked at his paperwork and he's written down, last time he did this, he performed 60 kilograms for 8 reps last time. Okay. That 60 kilograms you've lifted, that's called your working weight, right? Now, when you're warming up, set 1 needs to be 50% of your working weight as your warm-up set. So 30 kilograms. Your first set would be 30 kilograms to warm up. The second set would be around about 75% of your working weight, which was it's about 42 kilograms or 40 kilograms. And I would do it for 3 to 5 reps. And now you're ready for the working set. And we want slow concentric velocity, 4 to 5 seconds to lower the weight down, 4 to 5 seconds to raise the weight up. Remember that pause I spoke about in the loaded stretch position? You might want to pause for 1 second here or 2, and then you're using no momentum whatsoever, no swinging whatsoever, focus on the movement, and you're pulling your weight all the way down, and you're doing that to momentary muscular failure, that last almost impossible rep that you cannot perform anymore, and then you write down your result. That's exercise number 1. Now, the rep ranges for hypertrophy are so vast. We spoke about them. We can be as low as 5, as moderate as 12, or as light as 30. Here's the problem I've got with high reps. They're just exhausting mentally. Who wants to do 30 reps to hit failure every single time? I mean, you get to 26 reps and you're dead. You've done failure. But now here's the other reason. Next time you come back to this exercise, there's 2 reasons why we add weight to the bar or do extra. Number 1, to keep stressing the body above and beyond its prior capabilities, to force the body to grow. Otherwise, if it had a mouth, it'd be like, been there, done that. You need to give it a reason to grow. But the second reason why we add weight to the bar is to make the workout more efficient. Because if you can get to a place that you've got 60 kilograms and you've now performed 26 reps, well, if you don't increase the weight the next time, it might take you 35 reps to hit failure and then 46 reps to hit failure. And then you're going ad infinitum ad nauseum at 100 reps. So that's why we keep adding weight to the bar, as long as you're in the 5 to 30 rep range. Okay, that's the first exercise. It's a lat pull down or a chin up. The second exercise is the opposite of the pull. It's a push. So a shoulder press of some kind. So it's a vertical pushing movement. It could be a standing overhead press if you're an advanced lifter. I prefer seated, especially if people aren't advanced and they're just getting started, just to get the biomechanics right and the coordinations right, because the more you're lifting free weight, the more you have to focus on coordination. When you're sitting down and now you're in a machine, I don't have to worry about stabilizing the body. I'm seated, I can press more. Plus, I've done studies on electromyography where we've actually put strapped on people on the machine and be able to see what recruits more. Did you know that seated exercises recruit more motor units than standing exercises? Because when you're standing, the brain has to waste all this neural drive to stabilize you. When you're seated,
Really?
when you're seated, none of that neural drive gets wasted. So think about it. If I'm standing and doing a barbell curl, the brain has to send out neurological messages down to the lower extremities, down to the ankles, down to the calves, down to the spinal erectors, just to stabilize me. And now, of course, there's activity in the elbow flexors. Now we're going to send some to the biceps. Okay, well, if I'm seated, none of that gets wasted. Now, with a seated dumbbell curl, actually creates a lot more neural drive, more force output in the elbow flexors than standing. That's what I've noticed, and that's what I've seen. Okay, so machine shoulder press. So I like a neutral grip. You can do a wide grip if you like. And again, same movement patterns you might take. Now, you've already warmed up with the first exercise. So maybe this next pushing movement, you might do a similar thing. You might go one warm-up set, a second warm-up set, and then the third one is the all-out set. Okay, that's 2 exercises. The third one, we've gone a vertical pull and a vertical push. Now we're going to go to a horizontal pull. So it could be some seated row or some kind of row. Chest supported row is a great one. Yeah. So you're pulling the weight into you here, a machine row of some kind. That's a horizontal pulling movement. Okay. Now, because you've warmed up already from the vertical pulling, we don't need much of a warm-up. Maybe one warm-up just to get acclimated with the movement pattern, and your second set, you're ready to go. Okay. And then the final one is a horizontal push. So we can work the chest, the shoulders, and the triceps. Okay, some humeral adduction movement. The function of the pec major is humeral adduction. Okay, that's the humerus. By the way, we call it a funny bone, not because when you touch something, it gets all funny. It's because it's the humerus bone. That's what we call it, the funny bone. I'm not sure you knew that one. Okay, now that you know it. So the pec major is responsible for humeral adduction. So any exercise that brings the humerus together medially into the middle is going to recruit the chest. Okay, so that's the 4 upper body exercises. You don't need any more arm work than that. That's the 4 exercises, and we're going to do 1 hip extension exercise, either a seated leg press, where you're just sitting down and you're pressing away from the body, or if you can, do a squat. If you're advanced enough to do a squat, 5 exercises, 1 set to failure. With the lower body, I would suggest you do at least 1 to 2 warm-up sets, because you've done nothing for the lower body before you go for your working set. And I should mention something you need to know. The muscle fiber types for the lower extremities are a little different to the muscle fiber types for the upper extremities. There was a guy called Francis Benfato. He was a bodybuilder, incredible physique from France, okay? And he was using the same training modalities to the same loading parameters to train his upper body to his lower body. The same rep ranges, the same everything. Well, his upper body was growing great, but his lower body was not growing, and he was doing the same reps, and he's wondering why that wasn't happening. It's only once he switched gears and started doing a lot higher reps for the lower body, for the legs, that they began to grow. The lower body, Dave, has a predominance in slow twitch fibers. You think about it. If I took you into a gym and have you walking around from machine to machine, that'd be easy. But if I had you going in a handstand position, how long do you think you'd last? Walking around in a handstand position.
Oh, okay. I never thought about it like that.
You would not last. Okay, so the legs
Oh.
are designed to walk for miles. So they've got a high composition of slow twitch fibers. Now, Granted, if you recruit the fast twitch fibers in the legs, you're going to grow. But also, don't forget about maybe the slow twitch fibers. You know who knew that? There was a guy called Tom Platz. He was known as the quad father, or Godzilla. Quadzilla, they called him Quadzilla, because he had massive quads. Guys, look up Tom Platz, Tomplatz. He had enormous quads. He was known to squat 2 plates a side, which is 100 kilos, for 10 minutes nonstop. 100 kilos nonstop for 10 minutes. He knew about high reps for squats. He knew that the lower body it was a different animal to the other body. So hitting them with higher reps is what helps them grow. I'll give you an analogy. If you throw a duck in the air, it'll fly to Alaska. If you throw a chicken in the air, it'll land on your head. Okay? So why? Why is it that a duck can fly to Alaska and a chicken lands on your head? Well, look at a duck. You ever go like in Melbourne down Burke Street, Little Burke Street, and all those Chinese restaurants, and they're all hanging there?
Yeah.
What color are the ducks? Red.
Red, yeah.
Red. Okay.
Red.
The muscle fibers are red. What's red muscle fiber, Dave? Type 1 slow twitch fibers. Ducks are slow twitch fiber dominant birds. So when you throw them in the air, they can fly to Alaska. They've got that ability to fly to Alaska. That's what makes them fly that long. Whereas a chicken is a fast twitch fiber dominant bird. It's white. The chicken breast is white in color, not red in color. So it's fast twitch fiber. It tries to fly, goes, and then it just can't fly because it's fast twitch fiber. It's not fatigue resistant like the ducks are. Okay. But if you took a bite of a drumstick, if you look inside the drumstick, see there's bits of red through it? Because the chickens are walking around, that's slow twitch fibers. Their legs are slow twitch fibers. You get it?
Wow. Interesting.
Isn't that cool? Little cool. Yeah. So sometimes you might be recruiting the fast twitch fibers thinking you're maximizing growth, but there's certain parts of the body that have a predominance in slow twitch fibers, and they need to be hit with different rep ranges. This is why Mike Menzer had a 6-to-10 ratio for the upper body, and then he had 8-to-15 for the lower body. I would even say, I'll tell you right now, when I started doing 20 to 30 rep squats to failure for my legs, they grew like wild mushrooms on an autumn drizzled morning. They just grew like weed. My quads, I stopped doing that because they were growing so quickly. I couldn't fit into my trousers anymore, like my suit trousers. I was looking hideous. So I stopped doing that for that reason. But sometimes you require higher reps, and especially for the lower extremities. The hamstrings, on the other hand, a lot of the hamstrings are fast twitch fiber. Because think about it, if a sprinter's in position and they're about to explode and move, what do they need to explode? Fast twitch. So the hammies are fast twitch. They might respond better to lower reps. The quadriceps are slow twitch. They might respond better to higher reps. So if you are going to do the lower body, I suggest maybe getting the reps a little higher than, let's say, 12. Maybe hit 15, 20, see if you can get up to 30. But once you've recruited them, just one set to failure. You've done your workout. That's the 5 exercises: pull down, push, pull, push, and a leg press. That's the 5 exercises. How often? Well, I would suggest starting weeks 1 and 2, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every other day. And then as the intensity goes up, because you have to be beating your personal best every single time, the demands of the body also go up. So you have to compensate for the exhaustive effects of the workout by providing more rest. We spoke about it in the last podcast, which means your Monday, Wednesday, Friday now become Monday, Thursday, Sunday. Okay. And then eventually Monday, Friday, Wednesday. Okay. As you go up in intensity, so too do the demands of the body go up, and you've got to start compensating by providing more rest between exercises, between workouts. Now, if you did this program you would be shocked as to how much muscle you'll be able to put on in the next 12 to 15 weeks. Just this one program, 5
Wow.
exercises, because intensity of effort, because we're using these exercises to stimulate the major muscle groups in the body, you don't need any more than those. Those 5, if you did that over the next 10, 12, 15 weeks and focused on that one driver of muscular hypertrophy, which is what? 3 words, Dave. I said it last time. Intensity of effort. That's what it is. It's not the exercise. Well, by the way, it's not the exercise selection either. You pick an exercise that recruits the major muscle groups, whether you choose to go a leg press or a squat, it doesn't matter, as long as you are training to momentary muscular failure. People that I begin with from the get-go, if they haven't trained and they've got poor neurological efficiency, just to get the central nervous system acclimated to lifting, we start with machines. Because machines have a fixed groove pattern and they're easy to work with. And so they get better and better. Write down all your results, come back, beat your personal best, do it again and again and again. And then you'll just keep growing muscle tissue because you're always raising the bar. Okay? You should never get to a place. Let me predict your next 2 months for you. If you're already training right now, you've been training for a while, let me predict your next 2 months if you haven't been getting results. Look at your last 2 months. Look at your last 2 months. If you have not been getting results month after month, your next month is going to be about the same as your last month. Your next 2 months will be any different than your last 2 months. So if you're not getting results, and you should be always getting results, you should find a way. This is why recovery is so variable from person to person. I don't go back into the gym, Dave, until I'm fully recovered to go into the gym and beat my personal best. I go in, I've built my physique. I'm 100 kilograms and I'm about probably 9 or 10% body fat right now. 100 kilograms, 9, 10% body fat. I'm not a small guy. Guess how often I train? Every 5 days.
Wow.
I train every 5 days. And I have on my phone like an app that says it's called Days Since. Once I train a workout, I'll reset that and it starts to give me the days between workouts. And sure enough, people invite me, ask me, Anthony, we go to a workout. I'm like, sorry, not ready yet. Oh, Anth, I'm in town. Want to train together? Nope. Just my workout. Because I'll come and do a workout. I'm not fully recovered. So I train every 5 days. And that's impossible. How can you train every 5 days? You got all that muscle, you train every 5 days. Yes, the harder you train, the more muscle you build, the less often you train as you get older. Not the more often, the less often you train.
And so, over time, you're putting in more effort, but, you don't have to spend all that time in the gym.
You don't. And you'll know, these guys, the exercise scientists that did this, they found out that even a 3-week sabbatical, when you read the conclusion of this evidence-based resistance training study, they said that even 3 weeks of a layoff after 3 weeks did not result in muscular atrophy, which means that they didn't even lose muscle after 3 weeks. So those that want to train every single week, 5-6 days a week, just through fear of losing muscle, that ain't going to happen. I mean, think about it. How many times have I heard people go on holidays and they take 2 weeks off and they come back stronger than when they left? They're able to come back fresher. Their joints are better. They feel more relaxed. They feel more refreshed, and they come in and they beat their personal best from last time. Now, had they decompensated in muscle tissue, had they lost muscle mass, they would have been lifting lighter or weaker. But if they came back stronger, clearly they overcompensated muscle tissue. Clearly they build more muscle. It's not the same muscle as when they did 2 weeks prior. So the mistake people make with training, when you finished your workout, your body is not building muscle when you're training. It's breaking down muscle when you're training. So after your workout, you're depleted. You're putting back, your body's putting back what was used up. We call that compensating. It's putting back what was used up. And then it will only overcompensate, that is, build new muscle tissue, if left untouched during a sufficient rest period. Most people think they're not doing enough. They're going to go the next day and the next day and the next day, and they're doing more damage because other than a localized failure, Dave, we also have what we call systemic failure. There's the part of the central nervous system that gets taxed. Think of your muscles like, a guy comes on a Monday, does chest on a Monday, International Chest Day, Monday. Does back on a Tuesday. It's every Monday, International Chest Day. Does back on a Tuesday, does legs on a Wednesday, does shoulders on a Thursday, arms on a Friday, rests the weekend, comes back and does it again. 5-6 days a week, bum, bum, bum. And he says, but I'm not overlapping muscle groups, man. So I'm giving the chest on a Monday, I'm giving the back on a Tuesday, so I'm not overlapping muscles, so it makes it all right. Well, just because there's a localized effect that's not being overlapped, you're not fatiguing locally, that doesn't mean you're not fatiguing systemically, because the body, it's like a pool of energy, and you're drawing that pool from the same place. So you're at 100% on a Monday, you've taken 20% from the pool, you got 80% reserves left, you've taken another 23% on Tuesday, another 36% on Wednesday, and then before you know it, by the time you get to Friday, you haven't got much left in the tank. So you treat the muscles are like, here's a good analogy. The muscles are like speakers, and your central nervous system is like an amplifier. You can have the best speakers on the planet. You can have Bang & Olufsen speakers. Okay. But if you do not have a really good amplifier, you're not going to get the best potential out of the speakers. So meaning, even though your muscles are fully recovered, if your central nervous system is fried from the continuous training you're doing back to back to back to back to back, you're not going to get the best response out of your speakers, meaning like you're not going to be fully recovered, which is why we actually allow the days off in between to accommodate for systemic, localized failure and systemic fatigue, localized fatigue and systemic fatigue, until you're ready to lift again, right? Now, your workout, I mean, it's war, man. If you're not afraid to go into the gym, like if you're not taking get like, oh my God, am I going to do this again? If you're not getting like that, you're not training hard enough. Simple. You're not. All right. So
it's almost like if you're enjoying it way too much going into the gym, then
you're exercising, but you're not training. You're not training. It has to, like, it's not, man, it's not sexy going to failure. It hurts, man. It really, really hurts. Like going to complete failure. That's why people don't do it. They don't do it because it bloody hurts. Okay. That's the reason why people can't get to a place of momentary muscular failure. They'd rather come in frequently, have a bit of a chin wag, speak to the people. Ask me if I like exercise. Do I like exercise?
Do you like exercise?
No. I don't like exercise.
That makes two of us.
All right. I don't like exercise. I like, can you hear that?
Only faintly.
It's the kid next door is crying. So if you're not trained to true muscular failure, the reason why I don't like to train is because it freaking hurts. It hurts, man. It hurts a lot. What I do love about training is the results it gives you. If you're going into the gym 5 to 6 days a week, maybe even 7 days a week, do not tell me that you're going to true muscular failure. Do not tell me that you're beating your personal best every single week, you're not doing that. You're not. You may have superior genetics, but you're not going to be coming in 5-6 days a week, every week, and beating your personal best. You're not going to do that. You might go in there for a perv. You might go in there for a bit of a chin wag and speak to the people and get a bit of a pump going on, but you're not going in there to beat your personal best from last time. That's why muscle mass is performance dependent and performance is recovery dependent. If you don't rest enough, you can't recover enough to perform enough. to grow muscle tissue. People
I
don't
mean,
understand that.
this is good news to hear stuff like this, though.
Isn't it, man? It's really good news. So start with 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for 2 weeks. Then the following week, take an extra rest day. The Monday, Wednesday, Friday now becomes Monday, Thursday, Sunday. Do that for 2 more weeks. And then the next, then go an extra rest day, Monday, Friday, Wednesday, and then see what that does for you. If you have superior genetics in recovery that you don't need the extra day, then keep it to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Do 3 30-minute sessions. I've built some incredible physiques on 90 minutes of exercise per week. Melissa, one of my best ever students, she built her bikini body from 0 to bikini body in 90 minutes of exercise per week. No one does that. So you don't need much to build muscle tissue as far as frequency and volume. You need those exercises I spoke about. You need intensity of effort. Okay, you need intensity of effort. You get to go into the gym and beat your personal best every single time, and then be open-minded enough to take the rest you need to recover, to come back and beat your personal best again. If you can do that, I guarantee you great results.
Nice, yeah. And I don't know, I feel this could just be me, but I feel there's a thing with people like, even though you don't want to go into the gym,
Mm-hmm.
there's always this, when you are kind of trying to rest, there is always this feeling like, I should go. What am I missing out on? I really should go, you know, and like you end up almost sabotaging yourself.
Yeah. Change your fear of missing out to joy of missing out. Like change FOMO to JOMO.
FOMO, that's what it is. Yeah, FOMO.
Yeah, FOMO. You change your FOMO to JOMO, the joy of missing out. Because the fear of missing out for me, by not going frequently enough, I've turned that fear into, by me going frequently enough, I'm missing out on the gains by not getting the recovery. Okay? Because indecision is a decision. When you've decided not to go to the gym, you've done it specifically and you've done it in a way intelligently to recover. You're not doing it out of boredom. You're not doing it out of laziness. You're not doing it out of procrastination. You're doing it genuinely because you're not fully recovered to go into the gym. So feeling is the language of the body. The body speaks to you through feeling. If you feel like going in there and bending some bars and creating war and smashing it, you're fully recovered, go. The moment you have to think about whether you should go, it's like a relationship. If you're questioning it, you've got your answer. The question gives you the answer. Should I go to the gym? Hey, man, there's your answer right now. You're questioning it already. If you were fully recovered, you would never, ever ask that question. Mine, every 5 days. I can tell you right now, on the 5th day, I'm edgy. I'm like, what's going on, man? I'm fully recovered. I'm ready to smash it. I look at my phone, 5 days. That's how I knew. I trained really hard. From the moment I finished that last rep, hit the reset button. Don't even look at my phone again. And then I just rely on how I feel. And typically for me now, it's 5 days. It wasn't like that initially because the intensity wasn't as high as it is right now. You know, I might be doing a deadlift of 140 kilo and now at 250. That's a different intensity, man. So you can't rely on the same recovery from 140 to 250 in deadlift and expect to the body to keep growing and be giving it the same recovery. As the demands, as the intensity goes up, so too must the demands of the body. Okay, and you've got to compensate for those demands by providing more rest. And you've got to be okay with that. If you're not okay with that, then you're not really understanding true what it takes to rest and recover. I want to try and read you something from one of my mentors, man. I want to read you this by Mike Menzer. You got to listen to this. This is so good.
Sure.
He was a big rest enthusiast. He was a massive rest enthusiast, and he grew. Let me see if I could find it. He grew an incredible physique. Here we go. Many bodybuilders apparently don't understand that the big picture in bodybuilding involves two elements of equal value, literally 50-50, not 60-40 or 70-30, but 50-50. There's no gainsaying that the workout itself is important. It's only 50% of the big picture. The second element, not one scintilla less important than the workout, is the rest between workouts. And here's why. The workout, understand, doesn't actually produce muscular growth. It serves merely to stimulate the body's growth mechanism into motion. It is the body itself, of course, that produces the growth, but only if left undisturbed during a sufficient rest period. If you don't rest enough, you don't grow enough, if at all.
Wow, that's really
Isn't that powerful,
that's
man?
really nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
really
So
nice.
I hope, I mean, we've gotten to the same time, 140 last podcast, but it was about
Yeah.
140. I'm expecting comments again. When you're 1 hour in and and it's just gone
Yeah.
like that. You know those comments that people are making? But
Yeah. So, y given that training program that you talked about,
mhm,
the 5, exercises,
mhm,
um, if people put enough intensity of effort into that and, of course, have enough rest,
mhm.
they could be changing their physique in 12 to 15 weeks.
Easy. Easy, man.
Yeah.
Easy. Combine carnivore with that, combine a proper human diet with that, and getting sufficient protein and being okay to rest and recover. I guarantee results with that, man. I
Mm.
guarantee results. Just get yourself a notepad or get your phone out, and when you write your workout down, write down the exercise you've done, the load you've lifted, the reps you've performed. Maybe even write down the cadence so that you remember. Was it 5 seconds you took down and 4 seconds you took? What did you do? Did you do 3 down and 5 up? What did you do? Put the cadence down for that. And when you do that, I recommend between 3 to 5 seconds each way. 3 to 5 to lower the weight down, 3 to 5 to raise the weight back up, and maybe spend 1 or 2 seconds in that stretch position we spoke about, that disadvantageous position. You're going to grow muscle tissue like weed. You're going to grow really quickly, okay? Especially if you stick it out. And that's the other thing. People keep chopping and changing their workouts, thinking they need to stimulate new growth with something that's just going to like trick their body into growth or whatever. No, you just need stimulus and response. And the more stimulus, the more response you're going to get. But the more
Yeah.
stimulus, the greater response you have to cater for to allow to grow.
Mm.
Okay. If they did that, I guarantee results. I
Mm.
guarantee results. It's actually easier than people think, and they make it a lot harder than what it really is.
So I wonder if people watching now
Hmm.
take a picture of yourself today
Yep.
and then commit to and then commit to this program. And
Yes.
then I we would love to see your results in 12 to 15
Absolutely. And
weeks.
post them into go to the Lean 7 on Instagram and join links and whatever, and send me through pictures. Go to support at
Mm.
lean7.com.au, email me through your pictures. I'll post them. I'll wow you, man, through our Instagram, or maybe put them through Dave's Instagram or Dave's whatever, Dave's
Mm.
email, and just go out and just know that weight training is an important element. It's definitely here to stay, and bending bars is the name of the game for creating what we call youthful aging. I like to call that youthful aging. And what you don't use, you lose, man. So yeah,
Yeah. So Anthony, just to finish up, how can people get in contact with you? What's the best way?
best way to get in contact depends what they're after. If they're interested in maybe doing some work together, I'm an online coach. So most of my business is online. You can go to lean7.com.au. You scroll down, book a call in, and it's a Calendly link, and it will link in the times wherever you are on the planet. Let's sit down and have a bit of chat about your goals, and then we'll sit down and structure something together to get the job done. Yeah. So, or you can go to the Lean 7 on Instagram and just follow us there for some more tips and tricks. And I really enjoyed our sessions, Dave. I just want to thank you so much for being an awesome interviewer and giving me a voice to speak. I think you're very good at that. So, merits to you, man.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing such valuable information with everyone. Thanks so
You're
much,
welcome,
Anthony.
man. Like I said, knowledge only has value once it leaves your hand. It's a bit like money. It doesn't have value when you hold on to it. So knowledge only has value when it leaves your hand. And if I can save people 20 years of trial and error to figure out what works, what doesn't work, if you can just use this video, pass it on to some other people, share it around, this is all you're going to need to build muscle tissue, or at least get close to your human potential as possible, irrespective of your age. Okay, some of my best physiques I've built have been beyond the age of 65. Some of my best physiques, and they get the most incredible, what we call newbie gains. You know, the very beginning gains, and they start looking and feeling great. So it's yeah, keep lifting well, and raise intensity. It'll build character. High intensity training builds character, builds resilience. There's so much about high intensity training that translates into other areas of your life. And it doesn't have to be as difficult or as confusing as people make it to be. Just go in 3-4 exercises, maybe 5, hit it to complete muscular failure, give yourself enough recovery time to grow, eat the right foods, rest, and then go out and do it again.